Okay, so thank you so much for agreeing to be a mentor for this BC STEM project. I'm going to walk you through some of the documents that were sent to you in your mentor training handbook, just to give you a quick orientation as to what they all mean. So I wanted to start off with this document that's up on the screen, A New Vision for Science Education, just to kind of give you an idea of how science education is meaning to look in the next few years. Some classes, some schools, some districts are well on their way, and some are still in transition. So in the classes that you are going to be talking to, hopefully they're starting to do some of the things that are going to be found in the right side of the column and less on the left. When you were in school, when I was in school, only a few years ago have we started this transition. So you probably will find the left column, unfortunately, very familiar. So let me kind of just go through it with you. So in general, science education is going to involve less rote memorization of facts and terminology, less just kind of learning science concepts on their own in siloed fashion. And it's going to be more about what students need to know in order to solve a problem or in order to gather evidence-based information for arguments and reasoning towards solving those problems. We want students to be thinking more about science as a system, so to generate more systems thinking and modeling to help explain things that are happening around them, and then that would be the vehicle that they would use to learn science. It's going to be a lot less of teachers providing information to the whole class, like a less lecture, not zero lecture, but a lot less of it. So it's going to be more on the students to be conducting and exploring their own questions through investigations and solving problems, engaging in discussions with collaborative groups, and the teacher is going to be guiding them through that process. It's going to be less about finding the right answer and more about comparing several answers to figure out which one has the most evidence to be used. So it's going to be more about students discussing open-ended questions and focusing on what the strengths and weaknesses of each of the options are. Students will spend less time reading one textbook and kind of answering questions at the end of the chapter type of strategy, and we'll be looking more for students to be reading information from multiple sources, including science-related magazines, journal articles, web-based resources, and then developing summaries of information from all these sources. At the same time, hoping to develop in them the ability to discern reliable sources. As far as the investigations that they will be conducting in their classes, it's going to be less of, lab number 42 with all of the instructions we call them cookbook labs. And it's going to be more about investigations driven by student questions with lots of different possible outcomes to really kind of collectively lead to their understanding of the science concept that's being taught. Less dependence on worksheets, more about students writing in science journals, writing reports, or generating collaborative group posters or kind of thinking maps of what their models are, and then having to defend those models to their peers and allowing for constructive critiques and things like that. And basically one of the major tenets of the Next Generation Science Standards is that it's all science for all students. So we are wanting all students to be exposed to all kinds of science and not kind of the oversimplification of activities for students that have been deemed not as apt in science. So it's going to be more about differentiating and providing a whole host of supports so that all students can engage in sophisticated science and engineering practices. So that concludes that document. Another one which leads into this is just, I wanted to give you a quick overview of what the Next Generation Science Standards are. And essentially, I tried to sum it up in this one little sentence here, is that science education should reflect the interconnected nature of science as it is practiced and experienced in the real world. So every standard, every performance expectation incorporates 3 dimensions of the Next Generation Science Standards. And those 3 dimensions are what students can do, so those are the practices, what they know, their core ideas or contact knowledge, and how they think about science. So those are the cross-cutting concepts. So all 3 of these are to be found in each of the standards, because it's not just about what they know anymore, which is which is what it really did used to all be about. Now it's about what do they know how to do with that knowledge, and do they understand how it reaches across different science discipline and how all the sciences are integrated, and how do they use that information to solve problems. So I won't read all this to you, but you can see in this document that there are 8 science and engineering practices. So these are all of the things that we want students to be able to do in order to be acting like engineers and scientists. And these are their disciplinary core ideas, so the subjects of the content that they will be studying. And then these over here are the cross-cutting concepts. So these are the overreaching themes that you will find in all of the disciplines of science. So for example, you can find evidence of patterns in physical science and life science, earth and space science. You can find cause and effect in all of those as well. So it's about finding the similarities amongst the disciplines through these cross-cutting concepts. So the next document I would like to show you is more of a logistical piece of information. So in this one, you're going to get a teacher mentor information sheet. So once you are assigned a classroom, or once somebody reaches out to you, this is kind of a starting point that we created so that you guys can just get some general information about each other. So this top portion is what the teacher will fill out. So they have their name of school, what grade level you'll be working with, what the kids have been studying so far, that it may be related to what you could talk about, some ideas the teacher might have for supporting where they are in the curriculum. Hopefully the teacher will be able to take some time and ask the students to come up with some questions for you. So she would list those there so that you could have a little bit of a heads up. And then his or her contact information. And then down here, this is where you're going to put some of your information. So this is your place of employment, your job title, kind of just what you do on a daily basis in a couple of sentences, why you're interested in being a mentor, maybe a special task or a project or element of your job that you'd especially like to share, and then some of your preferred contact information as well. And of course, this is not, you do not have to limit the information you share to this sheet. This is just an idea to get you started. Okay. I also included for you a summary of all of the lessons that the students have the option of doing as part of this program. So another part of the program besides your participation as a mentor is that the students are actually going to experience a NGSS aligned lesson. It's delivered by a credential candidate at Cal State Channel Islands. And the idea is that they will be doing science prior or after they have talked with you. So a good piece of information to find out is if they have already done one of these activities. And then if they have, I just provided information for you on what that activity entails. My hope is that you might be able to read the activity and find some point of commonality that you could discuss in your talk. Of course, they have connections to content, you know, so like chemistry or engineering or biology. But even if you don't find a direct connection that you can make from the content, try to find some sort of practical connection. So they're all centered around troubleshooting, working together with their peers, failure. So a lot of these things involve building or coming up with solutions. And so the kids might get frustrated because they don't have the solution right away, or you know, they have to ask a lot of questions or things like that. So even if you can't find a direct content connection, if you can think about the process they went through in experiencing this lab, that might give you an idea of something that a commonality that you could mention between this activity and your job. All right, so then I also have a document here that's just called Tips for a Successful Experience. So the top 3 things to remember when you are having a conversation with elementary students is you want to be personal and passionate. So they want to talk to somebody who loves what they do, right? That's kind of why we have you talking to students, because we want them to get excited about what you do as well. Make it interactive, and then explain why your work matters. So as far as making it interactive, I have a couple of ideas here that you might want to use. They're just suggestions. So you could start off by doing kind of an icebreaker like 2 truths and a lie, which is just that you make 3 statements about yourself, and 2 of them are true and 1 is a lie, and the students have to guess which one is the lie. And then that way you can kind of control what you want to share with the kids, and any kind of anecdotes that might make them get to know you a little bit better. So other thing you could do is you could kind of have a question starter. So you could have them with a 3x5 card or a piece of paper, and they can add questions as you're doing a brief introduction, and you could answer a couple of those questions before you get started. Another fun one is you could showcase an object or an area of your workplace where you might show them what you do, or show them something that you use, or have them try to guess what some sort of tool is, and that could kind of lead you into your topic. You might ask them what they want to do for a career and try to find commonalities between what they want to do and what you actually do. Or you could use the STEM-inspired lesson that I showed you on the previous document as a point in commonality. So you could ask them, I know that you guys did the marble run the other day. What was something you thought was really challenging about that, or frustrating about that, or fun or easy? And then based on their answers, you might be able to share something that's similar to those feelings that you've had maybe in your job. As far as the main part of the talk, essentially, I just put a few points in here. You would not address all of them. It would take you way too long. But, if you just picked a few of them, then your talk would pretty much be outlined for you. So it's always good to just kind of start with walking them through a typical day, what you like about your job, what you don't like about your job, or, what you do and why you do it, who you help, and that kind of thing. You could talk about where you grew up and why you're interested in the job, where you went to school, the types of challenges you faced, or how you got to where you are today. A big theme in education right now is honoring failure, and trying to kind of reframe how kids see failure, to see it as something that pushes you forward. And, every time you fail, you kind of just figure out what you don't want to do, and that actually helps you progress forward. So, that's always a good thing to talk about if that happens in your career a lot, or if you can find a commonality with failure, that would be a good thing. Something that inspired you to take up your career, or who helped you along the way, if you had a mentor or a family member that inspired you, those things to share can be really good. And then just general tips, just to keep your voice level up. Make sure you're not reading from notes, because kids will zone out from that really quickly. You want to look at them while you speak. Try not to speak too slow or too fast. If a kid asks a question, it's really good to ask what their name is before you answer it, and then you can use their name in your answer. So if you said, "Oh, that's a great question. What was your name?" "Oh, okay. All right. So John, this is how you, whatever it is." So, but the kids really like that when you use their name. It makes it more personal. And then just to make sure, and you might want to think about some of your phrasing before you actually start to talk to the kids, is to make sure that you're talking to them in a language an elementary student can understand. So that might mean rephrasing some more technical terms or bigger words, because especially if you're talking to the little guys, like, kindergarten, second graders, because if they, if you start using words that they're not going to be familiar with, they'll tune you out really quickly, and then they won't get to hear all of the awesome things that you have to say. And lastly, I have a question and answer sheet for you, because whenever students are given the opportunity to create questions, sometimes then they can ask you some things that you might not expect. So if the teacher has asked beforehand, then, you won't be surprised. But I wanted to provide to you a couple of scenarios where you might get some questions that maybe would catch you off guard, so that you could kind of think about these answers before you were on the spot. So the first thing is to prepare some sort of polite response to address a question that you might not want to answer. So something like, "Thanks for asking that, but I'd rather stick to questions about my job," or, "stick to questions about why I like STEM," or things like that. So I put in here some typical questions that you might get asked, and you could answer some of them, or you could answer none of them, but this just gives you an opportunity to prepare. So one is, they might ask you how much money you make. And if you want to get away with this one, a good thing to do is to just give them a general salary range. So something like, "People in my position can make anywhere from blank amount to blank amount," They might ask you how old you are. You don't have to answer this. It's totally up to you. They might want to know about your family, so you could answer this minimally unless you're comfortable going into more details. Sometimes they ask you if you've ever been fired before. Clearly, you're under no obligation to answer this. Sometimes, it might be good to ask them why they're interested, and typically it might come down to that they just want to know if you've ever messed up or made a mistake in your job, which actually can be kind of a nice learning moment for them, where you can kind of explain to them how most jobs people are making mistakes, and what kind of mistakes are okay or expected, and what kind of mistakes maybe are not okay, or like showing up late or not showing up at all, that kind of thing, and maybe how getting fired can cause trouble with future jobs, things like that. So just kind of be prepared for that one if it comes up. They might ask you why you chose your career, which is a great question. Or they might ask you if you like everyone you work with, because students don't usually like everyone they work with, which is also a nice learning moment, because sometimes they don't want to do the project because they don't like the people that they're paired with. So this is kind of a nice moment where you could show them that being on projects with people doesn't mean that you have to be with people you like to be successful. So that might be a nice aspect to showcase for them. They might ask you what you would want to do if you weren't doing the job you're in, or if you're afraid of losing your job or making mistakes. Also, what they will tend to do too is ask a lot of personal questions, ranging from, like, what's your favorite food, or what kind of movie do you like, or what's your favorite superhero? And it's good to answer a few of these questions because it helps the kids connect with you. But you just kind of want to make sure that you don't get too far off track, because that's very easy to do with kids as well. One good strategy is if you start getting a lot of those personal or kind of off-topic questions, you can say, I'm going to save the last 10 minutes or the last 5 minutes of our talk just to answer those questions. And so then at the end, at that 5-minute mark, you can say, okay, so now is the time for all of your off-topic questions, and that way you can still talk about the more important points of what you're there to do, but you can still be kind of fun as well. And then just to remember to kind of keep your answers short, and also a lot of positive reinforcement with students who ask questions, just by saying like, oh, that's a great question, or, good thinking on that, or that's an interesting point, because kids like that, and that will help them open up to you a little bit more. So that basically concludes all the documents I have for you in this handbook. I want to just thank you again for volunteering to be a part of this program. Our whole goal with the program is that kids see people who look like them, who have similar experiences or backgrounds from them doing STEM, and you're helping with that. And hopefully through this program and others, we can get more students interested and help them learn about all of the variety that is involved in STEM.